Exit Slips, a lifetime of teaching in 10 sticky notes. 5. Bricks. It was commonplace to hear in the circles I traveled in throughout my career that teaching was an art, not a science. Teaching was not a formula but a craft. If so, the best measure of any artistic success are the artifacts themselves. This is what I desired. For me, my canvas was a classroom. The materials to mold and shape, of course, were my students. Common rules of art seek surprise, parsimony, and equilibrium. It all seems so overwhelming. To succeed each day, each class period, and with each student, it would require more than what one artist could produce. The volume of creativity to accomplish the wishes of a community of patrons would require a team of scholars, artisans, and citizens. Yet my first job provided no such workshop. I learned to create on my own. It had been the story of my life up to that point. My early training required me to be self-sufficient and self-reliant. I became satisfied with a relatively meager gallery of artifacts. That is, until we filled Andy's trunk with bricks. All of the king's horses and all of the king's men might have been unable, but it appeared Andy and I could. Filling that trunk with bricks cast a long shadow. For the rest of my professional career, my workshop was occupied by another fellow artisan. I may have joined his workshop, but these semantics are unnecessary. In Andy, I found a patron saint who was on the same pilgrimage. We were seeking the same artifacts. We would build a gallery together, one brick at a time. Andy and I met around the same time Steve Jobs created one of his great artifacts, the iMac computer. Jobs claimed that the I in iMac stood for Internet, Individual, Instruct, Inform, Inspire. These same words would come to describe our workshop. The artifacts from our laboratory of learning would discover the transformative potential of the Internet, discover the nobility of the individual, discover that the best means to instruct and inform is to inspire. And so it began with a short blurb in our local newspaper. The historic International Amphitheater, 4220 South Halsted Street, was to be razed. The Chicago Amphitheater, built in 1934, was originally intended to house the Union Stockyard exhibitions. Soon thereafter, however, the amphitheater became the epicenter of cultural activity, not just in Chicago, but nationally. The amphitheater hosted numerous notable sporting events. It became a common place to hold national political conventions, none more important than the 1968 Democratic National Convention. With the whole world watching, the amphitheater in 1968 became ground zero for a political story that still impacts our culture today. Democrats and Republicans still fight over many of those same issues. Television and film still recount those days. But the amphitheater was torn down in 1999, and few seemed to notice. That is, except Andy. He approached my desk that day after school and simply asked, "Do you want to go down and get some bricks?" Bricks? Let's go collect some bricks from the amphitheater. It sounded like a crazy idea. Alone in my workshop, these colors never were found on my canvas. Travel downtown, rush hour, private property, and steal bricks from the amphitheater? Sounds nuts. We left as soon as we found our lab coats. Riding downtown in Andy's car, I was reminded by the words of A.J.P. Taylor, who, when researching the 1848 democratic revolutions in Europe, wrote, "History reached its turning point and failed to turn." This was going to be a turning point in my career. I was no longer going to work alone. My going downtown to the amphitheater with Andy, to pick up bricks no less, was a marker. This day would point to a rich and satisfying collaboration that few have the joy of experiencing. The father of positive psychology, Abraham Maslow, studied the most mentally healthy people he could find. He found self-actualized individuals. Those who had fully developed their potential shared a number of things. They were outward-looking, spontaneous, creative, willing to take on challenges, and open to new ideas, people, and things. Successful artists, as neophiles, need novelty and change. This did not come natural to me. I was from a tribe of neophobes, anxious about change. This moment in time provided a fork in the road. The legacy of the Great Wall of China began with one brick. So too, if I wanted my life's work to be both meaningful and memorable, I would need to embrace change. I needed to go get some bricks. Transforming into a neophiliac has become one of the greatest assets. Accepting change requires parsimony of thought. Say yes, even when signs say, keep out. The Hebbian principle sounds so simple. Neurons that fire together, wire together. But think about your schoolhouse memories. Classrooms with desks organized in rows with doors that often remain locked. The teaching profession was seemingly designed to go it alone. Students are told to compete against fellow students for grades that are meant to punish rather than to commend. Thankfully, we are all epigenetic creatures seeking eusociality. We must learn to work together, despite the historic DNA of the one-room schoolhouse running through our veins. We must collaborate, both inside and outside of our silos, to build better colonies of learners. Cooperation, teamwork, and stimulating partnerships saved my teaching career. This newfound equilibrium, rooted in shared creative ventures, allowed the artifacts of our learning workshop to multiply both in quantity and quality. When Andy and I arrived to the stockyards, the famed amphitheater was no more. An historic, iconic landmark, home to so many cultural and civic moments, was nothing more than a pile of rubble. Chain link fences surrounded the property. The signs could not have been any clearer. Stay out, do not enter, danger, hard hat area. Be it reminded that artisans need not always be literate in the current mores. Andy parked and opened his trunk. No one was around. Bricks aplenty could be seen. Let's go. It did not take long before we found a hole in the fence. It did not take long before we began carrying out as many bricks as we could hold. We took many trips in and out before the suspension on Andy's car began to look like a classic lowrider. We had enough. Each brick that we took had a story to tell, and we were going to be ambassadors of those stories. As we drove back home, wondering where we were going to store those bricks, we laughed, we planned, we envisioned how a 21st century amphitheater would look. How might we engage our students in ways that would make them living bricks, political artifacts, sustaining a democratic system that all too often faces its own destruction? We left that afternoon imagining that we were preserving the amphitheater. In hindsight, we were to build something far different from those bricks. Over the years, as Andy and I attended national political conventions, participated in political symposiums, appeared on various TV and radio programs, the story of the bricks would come up. We gave many of those bricks away to interested politicos who also wanted a piece of that history. Little did they know that those bricks were so much more than the building blocks of the Chicago amphitheater. Those bricks were symbols of a collaborative partnership that continues to foster civic mortar. Andy and I have left our own artifacts for others to pick up. Luciano di Crescenzo wrote, "We are all angels with only one wing. We can only fly while embracing each other." Such aphorisms are easily forgotten. A trunk full of bricks, however, will live on forever.